I'm always interested in what's not being talked about, what people are experiencing, but are trying to stuff away, trying to sequester, trying to sweep into the corner under the rug, when all of that does is create shame, and all of that does is create anxiety.
Sheryl Paul has a unique ability to see the invisible, to see what has been silenced. Her book, The Conscious Bride, has been helping couples prepare for marriage for 20 years, and prepare in a very specific way. Her work helps couples create room for all of the emotions that come with the transition, not just the picture-perfect ones. Funny thing is, that allows for even more joy. This is Shame Piñata. I'm Colleen Thomas. Welcome to Shame Piñata, where we talk about creating rites of passage for real-life transitions. When I got engaged 6 years ago, a good friend of mine gave me a book called The Conscious Bride. Now, I'm not a reader, as my husband will tell you, but I devoured this book. I loved it because it touched on the shadow, the stuff we don't talk about, the stuff that gets in our way when we want to feel one way, but actually feel a myriad of other ways all at the same time. It named the shadow that hovers over the wedding, the attachment, the fear, the uncertainty, the hidden power struggles, and the grief that lies beneath them, and that a big part of stepping into a new life is letting go of the old one, and not just for the couple. The Conscious Bride gave me permission to feel all the ways, and it helped me create room for everyone else to feel all the ways too, so ultimately we could all process the transition without getting into weird fights about random things. I was so happy to have a chance to speak with Sheryl Paul. So what led you to write this book?
So I was in a master's program. Around that time, I was at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it has a very strong Jungian focus. And I had always been interested in rites of passages. And I had a deep sense that there was a lot that was not being talked about around the wedding. And I started to interview women, and I did a lot of interviews, especially when it came time to write the book, which came from my master's thesis. So it started out as the thesis, and then it evolved into a book. And I started to see that there was a big gap in the cultural conversation around transitions in general. All transitions are bypassed and overlooked, but particularly the wedding, and then in particular how much focus there is on the joy and the perfection, and everything has to be blissful and ecstatic from the moment of the proposal into the first year of the wedding. And there was just no conversation happening about the shadow, about the death experience, about what women and men are actually experiencing quite a bit of the time. And the more I researched and the more I looked and the more I spoke, the more it became quite clear to me that that there was a real gap in the conversation around this pivotal rite of passage, one of our few ceremonies that we still invoke in the culture. And yet it's done in such a way where we really gloss over the element of a transition, of the reality that when you are in transition, you are in a death experience, you are in a liminal zone, you are between identities, you are letting go, you are grieving. And if we only expect people to feel joyful, it creates a lot of anxiety, and it creates even more chaos than there naturally would be around an event like this. Because I'm feeling sad, because I have a sense of loss, because I feel like a part of me is dying, because I'm not over the moon ecstatic, something must be wrong with me or with my partner or with the decision to get married. Something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's an incredibly deep sigh of relief to the soul to know that nothing is wrong. In fact, the more you let those difficult feelings in, the more you will open to the joy that the pain and the grief and the discomfort and the vulnerability are the doorways into the joy, into what we are expected to feel and into what we hope to feel. And what I started to say earlier was that the wedding, more than any other transition, I think, has probably being pregnant and becoming a mother comes close, carries a very strong cultural expectation of unilateral joy. And it is supported in a big way by the wedding industry that sells perfection and sells joy. So it's very big money behind selling us the bill of goods, by selling us this message that you are supposed to be joyful. And the way to do that is to create a perfect event.
How do you work with someone if they're just starting to realize that they don't have to only feel joyful?
So I tell them to read my book. And, it's really the first part is about re-educating people to understand all of the normal and necessary feelings that accompany this transition. And once they understand that everything they're feeling is normal and necessary, they can start to let it in. And the vulnerability, feel the loneliness. These are all normal feelings that accompany transitions. So once we give ourselves permission to feel without that overlay of, because I'm feeling this, it means there's something wrong, everything changes from there. We don't then have to misassign meaning to the feelings and to think because I'm feeling sad, it means I'm making a mistake. No, it has nothing to do with that. You're feeling sad because you are in a rite of passage. You're feeling sad because you are in the death experience, letting go of this identity, this primary identity as single person, as daughter, and shifting into an entirely new stage of life and new identity. And there is no way to go through that without feeling grief.
You spent a good portion of the book talking about how the bride is separating from the father figure and the mother figure and the friends. Can you say more about that process?
Yes. So it can go a few different ways. If the bride is very close to her father, that's one set of emotions and experiences where tends to be a lot of grief, a lot of crying, really good medicinal necessary crying to make that separation process and to make it more effective, to make it more complete, to make it more conscious. Again, in the naming, to say, I am separating from my dad. I am no longer going to be, yes, I'm his daughter, but not in the same way, not as my primary identity, that my new partner is going to be number one, and I'm transferring allegiance. So that's one example of one way that it can go if someone's very close to their father. If somebody doesn't have a close relationship with their father, or there is no father figure in their life, that's a different kind of grief, of the loss of not having had that or never having had that. The same as somebody has passed away, if somebody who's getting married and their mother's no longer alive. That's one way that grief can come through, as opposed to a mother who is very much alive and very much involved, and then there's a separation. There's a loosening of cords that is required.
I'm curious, as you're speaking, how this applies. I'm sure it's very different, but how it applies to folks who are older when they get married, who are maybe a second marriage.
It can be different. It can be similar. It depends. It depends on a lot of factors. But regardless of the age, especially if it's a first marriage and you're getting married at 40, you're still letting go of a massive identity. And in some ways, it's even more of a letting go because of all of those years that you spent as a non-married person. And so there's a lot of grieving, a lot of shedding, of the independence, the separateness, all of the control that you have when you are a non-married person. Um, that every inch of your life is your own, your home, your space, how you spend your time, how you organize your weekend. It's all yours.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is its own massive death experience
Mm.
for somebody who marries later, and who has had that many more years than someone who's 22. If you're 42, that's a lot of
Mm.
years of being the sole architect of your life.
So you work with people around transitions, all kinds of transitions now. And I'm curious if ceremony plays a part in that with them.
I'm a big fan of ceremony because my work is largely over the internet. I'm not the one doing the ceremony with them. I would love to be that person, but I'm not. But I always encourage people to create ceremony and create rituals. And so, if it's somebody getting married and I've had a lot more men come my way, by the way, over since I wrote The Conscious Bride. And I'm thinking of some right now who are in one of my small coaching groups, and he's getting married on Saturday, and I won't share the specifics, but it's because it's his story, but it's really beautiful to witness men in their transitional process and the rituals that they come up with, because I encourage people to find their own rituals that are meaningful to them, ways to acknowledge the end of, in his sake, his bachelorhood, that time in his life is over. And so he has been sharing these incredibly potent rituals that have come to him for ways of recognizing that time in his life is over. And what ritual does is, as you know, is it concretizes, it makes it, and it embodies what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
so that it brings it out of just that realm of talking about it, and it sends it into a realm that we can't see with our five senses, but very much exists and yet calls on the five senses to help transmute the experience into another form. And so rituals help us cross over that sometimes very scary divide that just looks like a big cavernous empty space, crossing from one identity to a new identity, from one stage of life to the next. And without the rituals, we're pretty lost. And so, again, as I said earlier, the wedding is one of the few ceremonies that we have, which comes with ritual. A lot of people tend to minimize or diminish the ceremonial aspect because they're so focused on the party and the reception. That's where all of the energy goes, when really it's the ceremony that has so much power to carry us over the divide
Mm.
between one stage and the next.
And that's something I'm trying to encourage and put seeds out in the world for as well, that people take that, the ritual, the ceremony of the marriage, the wedding, and they feel free to do it their way so that it's powerful and as powerful and meaningful for the couple as possible.
Yes. Yes. And I think we are at this extraordinary time in our world where we have freedom to do that, where we are breaking out of the traditions that have gone stale and revitalizing them with personal meaning of what is meaningful for you. And there may be long-standing, time-honored traditions that are still meaningful. And I'm by no means one to throw everything out that we've come from, because many of those rituals are gorgeous and meaningful, but only if they're meaningful for the individual,
Mm.
right? Only if they land in a place where something inside of you says, yes, right? That helps me, that bolsters me, that comforts me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, whether it's at a Jewish wedding standing under the chuppah, it's just this beautiful symbol of our new home and this, long-standing tradition. If that's meaningful to somebody, great. If it's not, then it really it's not going to do anything for you on a spiritual level.
I shared with Sheryl that before my wedding, I created a self-commitment ceremony for myself, and that in that ceremony, I presenced all of my ancestral grandmothers with the acknowledgement of how important marriage might have been for them, how much of a survival tool. I did this because women's standing in society has evolved so much, even since my mother's generation, but yet we're all still connected to our ancestral legacy, and that felt like a really important thing to me.
That's incredibly beautiful that you did that, and so powerful. And it's probably the number one fear that comes up for women that I'm working with in their pre-wedding time, in their engagement, is the fear of, what does marriage mean? And does it mean that I am beholden to this person now and I lose all sense of self and I become boring and frumpy and this is the legacy. This is what we've been handed, right? This is what it has meant for thousands and thousands of years, is that for women, marriage has meant really the death of self. I exist to take care of the man and to take care of the children, and that's it. And so there's this very deep ancestral legacy that we have to consciously break with and recognize that we are so lucky and we are so blessed to be on this new threshold that we get to redefine what marriage means for us. And we only can really know that after we've taken the leap, because on the first side, on the engagement side, it all looks and sounds so scary to most women. And, that's why I have so many exercises in the Conscious Bride, more so I think in the Conscious Bride's Wedding Planner, on what does it mean to be a wife? What does that mean to you? What does the word wife connote? When you think of wife, what is the connotation for you? And it's very rare that someone's going to say, oh, I see this rad, sexy woman, like doing like the dance on the rooftops. Like, no, that's not usually what we think of when we hear the word wife. But it could be. More and more, we are redefining that and we are seeing that. And so I tell people, but look out into the world today and find those models of marriage where you see a woman who is doing her life fully, and yes, maybe she's also a mother and she's, loves being married and she's fully committed to her path and making her offerings and doing her work in the world, right? Separate from wife and mother. So yeah, I love that. I love what you shared. I love what you did. I think that is not only powerful, but essential on that ceremonial ritual level to recognize what we've come from.
I'm just so happy and honored to have the chance to talk to you after all this time of really, really, really appreciating your book and your wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Colleen.
It means a great deal to me to have had the opportunity to share Sheryl's wisdom with you. I hope you're able to use it or pass it along to a friend. Here's one final bit of wisdom, a quote from The Conscious Bride. A marriage is a rite of passage no matter when it occurs, and the woman must pass through the phases of her transformation. She must die, she must sit in the unknown, and then she will be reborn. Sheryl Paul is the author of The Conscious Bride and The Conscious Bride's Wedding Planner. Her website contains a plethora of resources for addressing life transitions. Learn more about Sheryl and her work at conscioustransitions.com. That's conscious-transitions.com. Our music is by Terry Hughes. If you like the show, please take a minute to review it on Apple Podcasts and learn more at shanepiñata.com. I'm Colleen Thomas. Thanks for listening.